Da 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 da. This time we watched Season 2, Episode 4, Catalina Caper.
The beach movie that destroyed all beach movies to come.
But first, some follow-up.
Devoted listener Michael, that's Michael who hosts This Is Your Mixtape here on Megaphonic FM. Anyway, he writes regarding a claim we made on our last episode, Adam. There were indeed pay toilets in Newfoundland. Apparently at the Avalon Mall, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, had pay toilets?
Apparently. But do you want to, explain what Michael is using as the sources for his pay toilet knowledge?
So it's from the Wonderful Grand Band's satirical tune, The Babylon Mall. Parking's free, but you pay to pee.
Parking's free at the mall. Pay to pee at the mall.
Yeah, which is weird, because I always remember it as, you have to pay to pee, but the parking is free. So I remember that song in reverse order. But yes, he said he apparently confirmed this with his dad. It's weird. I've never taken that line seriously, because like I said, as a kid, pay toilets were not a thing, but maybe pay toilets weren't common in the late 80s, at least not in Newfoundland. I will say this, I have a bit of a tie to the Babylon Mall because a band called Moby Mumble Mouse recorded a cover and they needed people to do the chorus, which is just screaming the word mall in a very high-pitched falsetto. And I'm on that recording.
But really, mall!
Yep, just mall. That I am one of the high-pitched Muppety voices that you hear on that version, on that cover of that song. So even then, even just having said those words or heard them in close proximity myself, I did not take that lyric seriously. So live and learn.
Yeah, it does seem strange to have a pay toilet at a mall, because the whole point is to get you to go in there and never have to leave.
Also, pooping's a right, not a privilege.
So also, Theme Squad, who wrote our theme tune, and who make a new variation of that theme tune for every episode, they have a new album out.
Woo! Yes, it's a bunch of moody, chill, down-tempo type instrumentals, and it's called You Have the Rest of Your Life. But you don't have the rest of your life to listen to it, so download it now at themesquad.bandcamp.com or through all the local streaming services.
Yeah, check it out. Well, should we get to the movie, which I believe is one of a close favorite of yours, Adam?
Let's go. This time we watch Season 2, Episode 4, Catalina Caper. And now here's something you'll really like, a charming animated opening sequence. Truly, Catalina Caper was the city slickers of its day. A trio of con artists, forger Anne Duval, her fusspot husband Arthur, and their bumbling sidekick Lawrence, steal a scroll valued at $500,000. They plan to sell a forgery of the scroll to a crook named Lycopolis by traveling to Catalina. Of course, Lawrence and the Duvals aren't the only folks making it to Catalina for the summer. There's Dawn, an everyman teen who has the hots for the mysterious Caterina Corelli, a girl who talks to fish. There's Tad, the Duval's son, who is dimly aware of the family's criminal past. Plus, there's a poor man's Don Knotts who tries to spy on the Duvals between pratfalls. There's more teens, but who cares? The SS Catalina booked a special performance by Little Richard. The results are pretty entertaining, and even the most awkward of teens is moved to dance. The music stops and we hit the beach. Don makes his intentions known to Katrina, but is informed she has a boyfriend. That is until said boyfriend, Angelo, catches her off guard with an unexpected mean streak, and she breaks up with him so Don can make his move. Meanwhile, Lawrence and the Duvals try to con Lycopolis via his right-hand man, Borman. After a couple of scuffles, Borman makes off with the real scroll. Tad overhears his father talking about their attempted con and enlists in the help of Don and other teens to hoodwink Lycopolis' men with the forgery. The plan's a success, and since Katrina's nasty boy Angelo turned out to be on Lycopolis' payroll, Don gets to punch Angelo out. Borman escapes when the pratfall guy skateboards on the scene. Pratfall guy reveals himself as an insurance investigator named Fingers, who's been tailing the Duvals. But in all the commotion and switcheroos, he can't find the scroll and thus can't arrest anybody. Womp womp. The scroll, now in Tad's hands, is quietly returned to its proper place in a museum. In an upbeat epilogue, the Duvals decide to give up their life of crime, Don and Katrina dance, and Lycopolis sails away with Borman swimming behind it.
Now to the episode summary. In the prologue, in Adorable Jammies, Crow and Tom say their prayers for Data, Robocop, Galaxina, R2-D2, and various other celebrity robots. Because of his long arms, Crow's prayer stance is slightly askew. For the invention exchange, in a seeming nod to the midriff-bearing fashion in the movie, Frank and Forrester don tank tops because they're wearing military tanks as shirts. Get it? Joel also has a weapon-related invention, though his pink tickle bazooka shoots feathers instead of, death. In segment 2, Crow and Servo ask Joel about the 60s. It starts off sounding pretty rad, but quickly devolves into drinking, misogyny, and, well, essentially the series run of Mad Men. In segment 3, Servo sings the famous Creepy Girl song to the film's odd love interest. As with the torch song to the turtle Tibby from Gamera, Tom gets really teary about his amorous feelings. We go to Deep 13 for segment 4, with TV's Frank throwing an unsuccessful Tupperware party. Keep an eye out for Trace Beaulieu barely keeping it together as Frank keeps dropping food on him. In the final segment, Joel and the bots try to figure out the movie using a chart that Joel has made. It doesn't go well, and Joel smashes the chart on the bots' heads in frustration. Another nuclear family destroyed by 60s youth culture.
Ah, finally, one of the classics.
Yeah. This is a real favorite for a lot of people up there with pod people for sort of the early seasons of MST3K.
Yeah, and I'd say that this is one of maybe the earliest kind of classics of the show. I had this one on VHS. This was fourth or fifth, released by Rhino. So I kind of know this episode back and forth. It was great to watch it for the first time since, my university days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is a real treat. There's tons of good lines. I loved the invention exchange, which features the great line from Frank, "The best beach party was at Normandy."
That's right. The best beach party ever was the one at Normandy.
But there's a ton of notable quotables from all the riffing. My favorite has to be at the very beginning when they're watching the animated sequence. Joel remarks to the mermaid, "Nice measurements, 36 to 85." So, it's a very fun episode. It's very different from what you would have experienced if you knew the show, especially if you only knew the show with season 1. But even with the KTMA episodes, this is a full color comedy. Almost all of season 1 was black and white.
Right.
And there wasn't a comedy or really very comedic movie in either season 1 or the KTMA days.
Right. And, we should mention that was a challenge for them to have to do something that was a little bit more comedic in tone as opposed to kind of the sci-fi monster movies that they had mostly focused on up to this point. So I'm going to actually read from the Amazing Colossal episode guide. Catalina Caper was a difficult effort for the writers, save for Frank, who was not only delighted by the opening theme song, but also by Arthur and his sidekick Lawrence, because it contained a lot of music and attempted comedy. So that's kind of a split sentence there, but it was the music and comedy that threw them off.
And it would be a challenge to riff because you have a surprisingly convoluted heist plot that's kept in the background of teen shenanigans and musical numbers.
Yeah, they also mentioned that the hopelessly convoluted plot really threw them off. And also the feelings they had about Tommy Kirk's career just made it a little bit of a slog for them, I guess.
And I guess more on Tommy Kirk later. But yeah, it was interesting because we were talking last episode, I believe, of the challenges of riffing a comedy. And this would have been their first attempt at it. And I think it's a smashing success. It's such a breath of fresh air even now because there aren't that many movies like this that were done by MST3K. We're used to youth movies say maybe The Beatniks or The Girl in Gold Boots, but a fun musical comedy with at least one musical act that you recognize.
Yeah.
This was neat and unusual and I don't know, full of life. I enjoyed the movie for what it was and I really enjoyed the episode.
I would say for me, and I don't know how this is going to land because I know this is also a special favorite of producer Chris's, but this movie has never done much for me, or this episode.
For shame.
I know. I'll say this. I do like the movie because it is more of a breeze to watch. It's a pleasure to watch on its own. It's a beautifully shot movie, and it's just so lighthearted that it doesn't feel like it's getting you down like so many 50s movies do with their seriousness. And I love, as I usually do for Joel era episodes, I thought the segments were really sharp. But the jokes themselves just kind of blew over me. And I just remember when I approached this, decades ago, I had the same experience, and I was wondering, like, maybe if a little bit of time would make me appreciate it more. And it's still the same. It just kind of, they make interesting jokes, but nothing really landed with me. The most interesting I found was the running joke about, basically the white supremacy of the movie, which hits really, like, just to think of them as being that woke in the 90s. And it's interesting also to read a lot of people, not surprisingly, did not like those jokes and thought they went on too long. Oh, yeah. Well, there's always somebody who doesn't like jokes about inequality. They think people should just shut up about it.
Wow, that's such a shame, because, like, this is baked so early into the show. But man, like, I don't know. I guess I associate that attitude with MST3K, especially in, like, the early years of the show.
Definitely.
And the Joel era of the show. Like, it's so weird. But yeah, like, that's where I'd say a lot of the most cutting jokes come from. I think my favorite is when they have the close-up on the newspaper. And this is a joke I've quoted with friends. It's like, white people voted the best people in the world. Young white male still on top. Like,
yeah.
I've never forgotten that joke. But, like, I love the wide variety you get. You get some really cutting comments about just how white this movie is, because the only people of color are Little Richard and a lady who's been bronzed up to look Italian.
What I find really surprising is that I think these comments are coming less from the fact that this movie is so white, but that it is in color, because all their movies are so white, But it's this one, just because of the way it's filmed, it's outside, everything's kind of blasted out. Like, the white people look so white. Like, especially the blondes look like they're about to go invisible,
I didn't find that so much. Like, I mean, I think everybody looks tan to the point where it's a little bit odd that they applied the makeup on our creepy girl at all, just because, like, Katrina only looks slightly darker. Like, she looks slightly more tan. Like, it's a very unconvincing attempt to make someone appear foreign. But I didn't find that they looked that blindingly white in the movie.
Oh, I did. I thought they looked really bleached out, a lot of them.
I think one of the reasons why they comment on the race aspect so much is that, like, it really sticks out with the appearance of Little Richard, like this famous and powerful black star who is so magnetic and charismatic. And then for the rest of the movie, you're following around Tommy Kirk and the poor man's Phil Silvers, who plays Lawrence. It's the rest of the actors just aren't up to much. And yet you have Little Richard, who, is arguably the biggest black star of the time.
Right.
And he just walks away with the whole movie.
Yeah, he's really magnetic in this movie.
And this isn't even one of his better songs.
Nope.
Scuba Party kind of sucks, but he nails it.
Yeah, the other musical acts, we'll get onto this in a minute, but they just do not have the pull. They were right to do it at the beginning of the movie, I think, just to get the excitement up a little bit for the drift that would come afterwards.
Yeah, I never thought I'd watch a beach movie and really pine for the comedy stylings of Frankie and Annette.
You've mentioned Frankie and Annette, and they were two big stars in some of these beach movies. Were mostly made by American International Pictures, if I'm recalling properly.
You recall correctly.
Yeah, I haven't seen really any of these movies. That might be because I'm not a beach person myself, really. But the closest thing I've come to watching a beach movie is being a real fan of the one Kids in the Hall sketch called Premise Beach.
Surf's up on Premise Beach! Premise!
Oh, yes.
Premise! Look in the show notes. You guys should really watch that. But yes, the idea that people are just kind of mindlessly having fun on a beach to no real effect. And I also come at it, we mentioned this in an early episode, from Archie comics that had a real fascination with beaches for most of their 60s run to kind of tie into this real interest in beach culture that was going on at the time. It just seemed like they spent most of their lives on the beach during that decade.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely tapped into a market. I remember I've seen some of the beach movies, most notably Beach Blanket Bingo.
Beach Blanket Bingo.
which I guess is the most famous of the bunch.
Oh, nice.
And I have seen 1980, I think it's 1987, Back to the Beach.
A return.
Yes. Frankie and Annette do an 80s revival of their 60s beach movies. And it's written more or less as if no time has passed.
Wow.
So they're still like love-struck teenagers, but they're in their 50s. But I had I looked down the many corridors of the internet to find a rundown of the official beach movies, which I found in an article written by none other than Laser Blast star Eddie Deason.
What?
Yes. He is a huge fan of 60s beach movies and other ephemera. If you've ever heard him on Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast, you really should.
Those two talk to each other?
Those two talk to each other, and my God, it's the sexiest thing I've ever heard in my life. I've heard punk bands less shrill than that particular episode of the Amazing Colossal Podcast. But the official Frankie and Annette beach party movies are as follows. They begin with Beach Party. They are followed up with Muscle Beach Party, which features music by Little Richard and the Supremes.
Ooh.
Then there is Bikini Beach. There's Pajama Party, in which Frankie is just in it for a few cameo appearances, but Tommy Kirk is the lead. And Tommy Kirk is a Martian who Annette Funicello has to teach the ways of wooing human women. It's basically the Earth Girls Are Easy of its time.
Wow.
Then there is the most famous of the bunch, Beach Blanket Bingo. That's one of the few that I remember liking because it has Paul Lynde in it.
Okay, sold immediately.
Yep, Paul Lynde is in it as a bad guy, if I recall correctly. Also, Don Rickles is in it. And Buster Keaton actually has a small appearance in it, doing some pratfalls.
That poor man.
Yeah. It is followed by the second best title in the entire series, How to Stuff a Wild Bikini. And not including Back to the Beach from 87, because that, of course, wouldn't be one of the original run. The last official beach movie. Best title, Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. What I'm saying is that these movies might be amazing.
You know what? I kind of want to watch them now.
I would recommend Beach Blanket Bingo. What I recall, like, I was not terribly interested in the beach movies as a kid. I seldom went to the beach. And in Newfoundland, you went to, like, rocky pebble beaches when you went to the beach. And, like, the water always stank. It wasn't fun.
Right. On the other hand, I have to admit, we had really nice beaches where I grew up, which is along one of the Great Lakes. And they do actually have sandy beaches with very calm waters. So I spent a lot of time there, and yes, it is. You can have a real teen culture grow up there if you're right by the seaside, and it can be very carefree and lovely. But I don't like the sun, so I never really got into that all that much.
Oh, did you, like Lisa Simpson, make friends when you started wearing a tie-dye shirt and a backwards hat?
I wasn't as socially astute as Lisa Simpson, I'm afraid.
Oh, wow, that's saying something. Who's about as socially astute as Eddie Deason.
So you are beach neutral, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I have no qualms with the beach. I just choose not to go there.
It's interesting to find out, doing a little bit of reading on this, how recent it is that people enjoyed beaches. It's really something that came with the Industrial Revolution, which I find so ironic because as soon as you start wrecking your landscape, you need some way to escape it, and then you go to the shoreline. But before that, beaches were scary places because it's where shipwrecks happens. It's where storms happened. It's where basically you got away from the comfort of land, and you had to go out there in order to trade and make money, but you were very likely going to die in the process. So it was not something that people sought out for pleasure. This is from an article that we'll have in our show notes from the Washington Post. In Shakespeare's plays, the sea appears in the form of tempests, chaotic journeys, and shipwrecks. Yes, very true. There's never a happy boat trip in Shakespeare.
That's true, and it was a surprisingly belated invention that was the male full-body swimsuit, which was striped red and white.
Right. So that was another thing. So it's doctors started to recommend that people go to the sea for health reasons because industrialism was making everything so poisonous in the cities. And what was especially considered to be quite good for you was to shock your body by jumping into the cold water.
The first polar bear club.
Exactly. And so they actually had women with bathing attendants who would push them down in the water for different parts of their body so they would have the right shock.
Sorry, that sounds way more violent than I'm sure it was.
And then, of course, like the good air. This is around Austin's time when going to the beach became more of an excursion for people.
Mm-hmm.
And with the trains and with the railroads coming in the 19th century, it was something that everybody could do, not just the upper classes. So it became like a popular destination, and then it kind of got exported from. It's ironic that this all started happening in England, which legendarily does not have nice beaches.
That said, I did go to the beach, not in England, but in Wales at Port Merion, which was lovely, but I kept expecting to be attacked by a giant white ball.
Nice. There's a lot of music in this movie. It's probably one of the better things about this movie, actually.
Yes, I share Frank's love of the opening song, Never Steal Anything Wet.
You may still kiss, it's permissible, you can return it.
Isn't it beautiful? Like, it just captures the idea of being underwater so well with that streamy little melody it has.
Yeah, it was done by Mary Wells, who is best known for the hit My Guy.
Nothing you can say can tear me away from my God.
It is an inescapable hit of the 60s that had that distinct Motown sound.
Yeah, she's called the Queen of Motown.
Yeah, I really enjoy the song. It's dreamy. I couldn't quite make out the lyrics, but that was, of course, partly covered by the riffing. But it did seem kind of like incoherent as a song, which was fine. It had lyrics that were less easy to make out than those from Operation 0007. Which, at least were sung by someone whose first language was not English. But that being said, like, it's still like an enjoyable, dreamy melody, and Mary Wells is giving it her all, so it's enjoyable, even if it doesn't really click. Like, I couldn't remember a lot of it in terms of the lyrics, but I still got that basic melody stuck in my head, probably because it sounds a little bit like My Guy.
There's a little bit of a feeling of the soundtrack of Manos, the Hands of Fate in it as well. It's getting kind of those vibes in it, not in an unpleasurable way, but it's definitely, it's of a moment. And our producer Chris has managed to more or less track down the lyrics of this strange little number. I'm going to give you a little verse. Steal his shaggy little baggies. Make sure they're dry first. You're not a seal, so never steal anything wet.
Yeah, that sounds like a good old ode to never touching wet balls.
Steal his shaggy little baggies.
Yeah. Ugh. How revolting.
I think we have a title for this episode.
I transcribed those. I didn't find them.
You transcribed them,
I looked
yes.
everywhere for them, and I had to finally sit down and just listen to it a million times to transcribe them.
So we need to give credit to producer Chris. He's transcribed this, and it couldn't have been easy.
Will we have all these lyrics on our site?
Sure.
Excellent. Should you want to look them up, you'll get the King James version of Never Steal Anything Wet.
So we have kind of an overarching band through this entire movie, the Cascades, which is a band I'd never heard of. They're kind of like Beach Boysy. They're playing backup for two other acts, and they play their own song on this, which is the worst song in the movie.
Now I know just what I've been doing wrong.
Well, I don't know. What about the Book of Love? Well, we'll get to that later. But I don't know. This was a hard song to remember, even after seeing this episode a bunch of times. They have a hit, which is called Rhythm of the Rain.
Listen to the rhythm of the falling rain, telling me just what a fool I've been.
Which I listened to just prior to recording. I'd never heard it before. And it kind of sucks. It's really bland. It sounds like a rejected Monkees song. It's not very good. And I'm surprised. The song they sing here, it was written by Ray Davies of the Kinks.
Right. And the Cascades agree that this is not a good song. It was badly arranged for them.
Mm-hmm.
And So they are totally in agreement with and are very good humored about the riffing they get for this particular rendition of the song. The Kinks version is quite lovely.
Yeah, I was shocked that there's a much better version, and it wasn't even released.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what really shocked me, is that eventually what came out was a demo that was on a reissue of their 1965 album, Kinda Kinks. And it's great.
Now I know just what I've been doing wrong.
Yeah, it's really lovely. So, sorry you didn't get an opportunity to actually show what you're made of, the Cascades.
Mm-hmm. Cascades are easily the best band named after dish detergent. But next, we have Carol Connors, best known for playing Archie Bunker on the hit series All in the Family. Wait, that's not right.
Love has never been figured mathematically, 'cause the business of the heart's done biologically. The book of love, a bestseller.
They make a lot of jokes about how she is instantly forgettable and didn't have
Yep.
anything after this, but she actually did have something of a career.
Yes. So Phil Spector, who we had mentioned last episode because in his terrible final days he murdered Lana Clarkson, but prior to that he was in a band with Carol Connors called the Teddy Bears, and he had written their hit "To Know Him Is to Love Him."
Right, and she apparently dated Elvis for a while.
Wow.
Yeah. Joel Nabat's saying that she didn't have anything past this Catalina Caper. Not entirely true. In fact, just recently, I'm reading this from an article we'll post. Last year, Connors, she's still active, conducted a 117-piece orchestra at the Kennedy Center in a benefit concert for the Wounded Warriors charity.
Oh, what's the Wounded Warriors?
I think it's a veterans group.
Oh, well, I just want to make sure it's not the actors of the Warriors who are like not doing so well and need medical attention.
She scuba dives around the world with her friend and former Playboy cover model and singer Barbie Benton.
Huh. So you're saying she has scuba parties?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to the track from Little Richard, which is called Scuba Party. It's not one of his better songs.
This is Little Richard.
Baby, come along with me. We're gonna scuba dive in the deep.
It was written by Jerry Long, who wrote Never Steal Anything Wet, the title song. And this was, along with Never Steal Anything Wet, Scuba Party was one of the alternate titles for this movie. It was going to be called either Scuba Party or Never Steal Anything Wet before they settled on Catalina Caper, all of which are terrible titles.
Well, at least Scuba Party lets you know that there's going to be scuba in it.
Yeah, but do you think scubaing is a big theme of the movie? The bad guy's henchman does it a couple of times, and the teens scuba in order to find the scroll. But it's more a more accurate title would be Meandering Around the Beach While Crime Happens, the movie. This should have been called Beach Blanket Shrug.
Yeah. But yes, this was the best song because it's performed by Little Richard. But it's not one of Little Richard's best songs,
No.
which of course is like Tutti Frutti and Lucille. Any of your favorites?
Well, Good Golly Miss Molly.
Good golly, Miss Molly, sure like the bone.
Really interesting guy. So he had quite an epic life. He's still alive.
Yeah.
I always feel bad when I say that. He's still alive, everybody.
Yay! Well, I'm happy he's still alive. He's held up extremely well. Like, I remember seeing him in a Pee-wee special, in the Christmas special. He shows up,
Wonderful.
and he looked exactly the same as he does in this movie. My God, one can only hope to hold up as good as Little Richard. Like, I have changed more from 30 to 35 than Little Richard has in the 60s to now.
And it's funny because his aesthetic was like pre-Pee-wee to some extent.
Yeah.
The 50s rockabilly that was transferred into Pee-wee's Playhouse with just like a subtle queer undertone. That's just totally Pee-wee, you know?
Well, how subtle is it with Little Richard?
Well, this was just it. He had, he was kicked out of his house for being quite effeminate, and he maybe wasn't openly gay. He wasn't, but he later acknowledged when he was a lot older. He's like, yes, I'm gay. He But he struggled with that because his parents were very religious. And so between the 60s and 70s, he kind of veered between being kind of a gospel revivalist for Christian singers and then going back to secular music and also secular stuff like drugs and sex and all of those things. So considering that background, yes, he has held up extremely well.
And, what's funny is, like, he got into trouble in his personal life early on for being effeminate. Yet at the same time, it's like his larger than life persona is one of the things that made him such a star and so iconic and made him catch on. Like
Exactly.
he turned that, I don't want to call it a personal weakness, but a thing that made him a target into what made him bankable.
Mm-hmm.
Bankable or bangable?
I said bankable. I'm trying to keep things, family friendly here, Chris, for heaven's sakes. Show some respect for Little Richard. A man named after a penis. Anyway. I always assumed. I had always heard the rumor that Tutti Frutti was code for being
Oh,
gay.
God. Have you seen the original lyrics?
Was it a womp bump, a loop bump, a womp bump gay?
No. It's about homosexual sex.
Oh. So it's not about having a girl named Daisy. Unless that's also a thing that I don't know about.
Do you have the lyrics in front of you, Beth?
I did. Hold on.
I can post them into the site.
Yeah.
I'm just reading the lyrics now. Well, they're better than never steal anything wet.
Yeah, like they make sense.
Oh boy.
Link in our show notes.
Yep. Well, let's go for it. Tutti Frutti, good booty. If it don't fit, don't force it. You can grease it, make it easy. Tutti Frutti, everybody. Which is also, I believe, those are the directions for my Nan's cake recipes.
So I started saying Tutti Frutti, good booty, because at the time, it was good. I don't know why so many people try to tell a lie and say it ain't good.
Oh, man. Now, I don't know exactly much about Little Richard's personal life, but there was a recent article there about essentially giving up being gay in order to drench himself into Catholicism once more. And that seemed really sad to me.
Well, I think it's just those two issues are just, have kind of, he's pendulum between them his entire life. So I don't think either one of them lasts for very long.
I hope so.
I don't think it's Catholicism specifically.
No, it's probably
Baptist.
baptism.
something.
Yeah, Baptist.
I do not know specifically what branch Little Richard is in, but it's kind of sad reading about it because he describes, and I wonder how truthful he's being here, but he describes his sexual life as a lot of angry masturbation. And for one, don't knock it till you've tried it. Angry masturbation is some of the best masturbation in the world. If you're gonna play solo, play angry.
Okay, well, there is another song in this, but it's not from the movie. It's from the episode. One of the most popular Tom Servo songs, Creepy Girl.
Creepy girl, won't you be mine? I'll give you scrolls and fish and tinker toys and wine.
Yes, I've listened to this a bunch of times, not just because I love this episode, but this is what got me to get a copy of Clowns in the Sky, the MST3K soundtrack. Way back when, and I would listen to this all the time. Kevin Murphy has a great set of pipes, as I'm sure we've remarked on before.
Yes, and this is also a very well arranged song, which I'm sure was Michael J. Nelson. He has a real ear for 60s beats, which he also brought with Werewolf, the Werewolf song.
Yeah, this is, again, showing off a real talent for 60s pastiches. I love Creepy Girl as a song, but also, like, the lyrics just plain make me laugh, namely starting with C is for not quite knowing what ethnic group you're from, which always got a laugh out of me because the first few times I watched this episode, because there's so many riffs over the dialogue, you don't quite make out that Creepy Girl's name is Katrina Corelli, so she's meant to be Italian, obviously. Her boyfriend's name is Angelo.
Right.
Again, making her Italian, hinting at a big Italian.
Who hang out with a bunch of Greeks.
I think Italian and Greek is as foreign as the screenwriters want to get in terms of their understanding of the world.
Well, that's just like, I found it so revealing that even though the baddies had done a crime, because they're American, they're allowed to get away with it.
Although Lacopoulos gets away with it.
Sort of. I guess
he
nobody
sails away.
He sails away, but I guess nobody really gets punished in this movie exactly. But they get redeemed, right? They kind of get redeemed.
I guess so. Like Lacopoulos sails away to commit crimes another day, so that's fine. And he's already got the babe who kisses his head.
Right.
It's really the only people who suffer is that Borman gets the comical swimming alongside his boss at the very end. Like he's in the water chasing after the boat. And Angelo gets beat up and is never seen again.
Right.
But yeah, the Duvalls certainly come away unscathed, and nothing happens to Lawrence, so that's true.
Yeah. But to just kind of pull it back in, good song.
I guess one of the big draws for this movie when it originally came out was the fact that it starred Tommy Kirk.
Right. So he was a quite famous child actor for Disney, and he was in things like The Hardy Boys, and Old Yeller was probably his most starring role as the kid who shoots his dog.
Yeah, he's the kid who cries after Old Yeller, and also he's in the original Shaggy Dog.
Right, and he was like the kid in The Absent-Minded Professor and all of those movies.
Yeah, he was in Swiss Family Robinson, which I loved as a kid. He's in the movie version, not the TV series.
Right. But he turned to beach movies when he kind of got excised from Disney for essentially being outed as gay.
Yeah, he it's quite sad to read about because in the 1960s, as he describes it, in the early 60s when he realized his sexuality and had matured, he didn't know of any places to go. He said he only really began to hear about places where, quote, gays congregated early in his career, and he had a lot of what he described as back alley affairs, which just sounds frightening.
Yeah.
And he was eventually outed to Disney, from what I understand, by the mother of the guy he was seeing at the time.
Yeah. So he was basically blackmailed out of it. And after that, he got picked up on some of these beach movies, but that's not something that is easy to come back from. And so he admitted he made a whole bunch of garbage movies because he was really just kind of trying to get his feet back. And then it was the 60s, so he got involved in drugs and just really kind of fell off the pier for a bit.
Yeah, it gets kind of depressing. He, by about 64, he's out with Disney. He's starting to do anything that he's offered. So that's why he's in such movies as Catalina Caper, the beach movie where he plays a Martian, Pajama Party. And lastly, he's in the unrelated Mars Needs Women.
And the other MST3K movie, The Village of the Giants.
That's right. So he's in nothing but crap.
So, yeah, unfortunately, he follows the trajectory of a lot of young men who are gay in this in the mid-century. It's just they have no mooring and don't know how to feel about their sexuality. So they start taking a lot of drugs and so he eventually left acting completely, and now he actually has a carpet cleaning business. So he got back on his feet.
Yeah, he had his own business, and he ran that, and he seems to be doing fine with that. I never heard of any fundraisers to save Tommy Kirk's house.
They treated in the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide as a really depressing thing that happened to him, but so many people like him died in the 60s.
Yeah.
They didn't make it out. So the fact that he made it out and is relatively stable, I think, is a success story.
Yeah, he was able to start his own business and rebound and get out of a really horrible low where he was just declining into drugs. I don't know. I found that, if not inspiring, then at least kind of a happy end to this story. Okay, he'll never be a big actor again as he used to be, but he seems to have his fond memories, and specifically actually pointed to Swiss Family Robinson as the movie he wants to be remembered for.
Huh. Yeah, I think he was pretty good in that, if I recall.
Yeah, I mean, he was certainly memorable in Old Yeller.
Movie I've never seen and don't want to.
Why, you don't like dogs dying? One of my favorite genres. That's why I like watching the uncut version of Milo and Otis.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shadow 13.
It's time for the Shadow 13. 13 fast facts and frolics about Catalina Caper. Ready to dive in? Go, Beth, go!
Sunny Santa Catalina Island, which is about an hour offshore from Los Angeles, has served as a film locale for movies such as Waterworld, Jaws, Apollo 13, Dawn of the Dead, and Chinatown.
But the first movie filmed on Catalina was by flaming racist D.W. Griffith. A few years before filming Birth of a Nation, he created a short called Man's Genesis. It tells the tale of a prehistoric man and his attempts to impress a prehistoric woman, named, and I am not making this up, Lily White.
Boy. More unfun facts about Catalina. It was on a boating trip to Catalina where actor Natalie Wood drowned under mysterious circumstances in 1981. Her unsolved case was reopened a few years ago, and the investigation is still ongoing, and someone has made a podcast about it because of course they have.
The SS Catalina, which takes our heroes to the island, was sold off for scrap in 2009. It served for 85 years, has allegedly carried more passengers than any other vessel ever, and was nicknamed the Great White Steamer.
Oh my god, stop it!
Yeah. Beth, have you ever had a Great White Steamer? I wouldn't recommend it.
Our eye-rolling criminal mastermind Arthur is, as the bots point out, a knockoff of Jim Backus's character, Thurston Howell III, the millionaire from Gilligan's Island. The show debuted in 1965, 2 years before Catalina Caper was released. Although considered a classic now, it only ran for 3 seasons before cancellation due to low ratings.
Want to know about the sidekick? Tell him about it, Lawrence. Arthur's henchman Lawrence gets compared to Alan Sherman, an American comedy writer, singer, and actor in the 60s. Sherman released several song parodies, including his most famous number, Hello Mudda, Hello Fada, which takes its tune from Amilcare Ponchielli's Dance of the Hours, a classical piece featured in Disney's Fantasia.
Another song parodist, Weird Al Yankovic, pays homage to Sherman on the cover of his self-titled debut LP. The album art depicts Weird Al daydreaming about becoming a rock star from his cluttered bedroom, with a copy of an Alan Sherman record prominently featured at the base of his bed.
Jim Begg, who played henchman Lawrence, also appeared with Tommy Kirk in Burt I. Gordon feature Village of the Giants, which featured in a 5th season episode of MST3K.
Lawrence wears what Joel keeps calling a Crayola hat, a red and white bucket hat with lots of brightly colored vertical stripes that looks like a more eye-popping version of the hat worn by Gilligan on Gilligan's Island. Were the people who made this movie the only ones watching Gilligan's Island?
Mike Blodgett plays Bob Draper, the blonde water cop who gets all the good lines. What? All right, sure. I'll go with that. Blodgett later starred in Russ Meyer's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls as Gigolo Lance Rock. Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, the greatest Roger Ebert script ever filmed.
I could tell you how the guy who plays Tad was in an episode of Star Trek, the original series, but instead let's talk about the opening animation. It might remind viewers of the animation stylings of Rocky and Bullwinkle. It isn't necessarily a direct ripoff, though. Jay Ward's animation style, with its minimal movement, pencil sketchy style, and big old feet, was quickly seen everywhere in the 50s and 60s.
The titles were created by Murakami Wolf Films, which later became Fred Wolf Films. They did some very recognizable work, most notably for either the animation for Frank Zappa's 200 Motels or a little TV show called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And finally, this is the last episode of MST3K that doesn't end with a stinger, that little clip from the movie that plays after the credits in most of the later episodes. There are a few Season 8 episodes that feature a shot of the observers instead, because Season 8 has to be different.
And that's time. Beth. Tupperware parties are a thing I know of only because of television, which made it a big deal, especially in 80s sitcoms. I never thought it was an actual thing. Is this something that you are well versed in?
No, I've never been to a Tupperware party nor hosted one myself, but I have seen things that are similar. So when I was growing up, there were some Avon ladies in the neighborhood that would come by hawking, various cosmetics. There was a few people I know who got pulled into pyramid schemes that are very close to this kind of peer-to-peer marketing that was started with Tupperware. So Tupperware was invented in the mid-century, and was one of the first examples of basically using polyethylene to keep your leftovers fresh. Leftovers were now a thing, because you had refrigerators. Interestingly enough, you know what they used before Tupperware to keep leftovers relatively fresh?
I'm going to say asbestos.
Shower caps.
Well, that's how I keep my hair fresh, so that makes sense.
So they were put into stores, but they didn't sell very well because nobody really knew what they were for. So what they needed to do was try to figure out a way to teach consumers how to use these products. And then along came a lady called Brownie Wise, a divorced single mother, who came on to the Tupperware company and suggested this kind of direct selling business model. She had used it in previous marketing places, but it really took off with Tupperware. So she basically was like, you have these hostesses and they invite over various housemakers and teach them how to use Tupperware. So they would show how to burp it to get out the seal. They would show you could turn it upside down and nothing comes out, and you can drop it on the ground and it doesn't shatter. This stuff is amazing. So she was so successful that the Tupperware company ended up pulling all of their wares out of stores and just using this kind of direct to peer model of selling. For the next few years. So poor Brownie Wise, unfortunately, she fell afoul of the maker eventually. He kind of started to resent how successful she was. So he kicked her to the curb in the 50s, and she kind of lived in obscurity after that. He, on the other hand, Earl Tupper, shortly after sold his company for $60 million, left his wife, and got a little lady in Costa Rica somewhere and lived the rest of his days.
Ironically, he kept her fresh in a plastic bin.
Yeah. But there's some debates in feminist circles of whether this move into kind of Mary Kay and Tupperware, peer-to-peer selling was a good thing for women or not. Because on the one hand, it gave housewives a way to work in a way that they didn't have before, because mostly work happened away from the home, right? It happened in offices, factories, or department stores. And they couldn't do that because they were usually looking after families. And the flexibility of this model allowed them to make some money on their own and do something that wasn't just, housework.
Like I said, I remember this as a stock sitcom plot. So all I remember is people dreading having to go through Tupperware parties. And that was just a stock punchline that was used in a lot of bad scripts that they're making fun of here in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that something that was so female-oriented would become an easy punching bag because, again, misogyny. But now, I don't know if Tupperware's model is kind of like a pyramid scheme or multi-level marketing. I don't get the sense that it really was, but it certainly kind of gave a model that also is quite toxic. Multi-level marketing is terrible and nobody should ever do it. I unfortunately had a very naive friend call me up out of the blue. I hadn't seen her in years, offering to let me in on this amazing opportunity to become a salesperson for, wait for it, supplements.
Ew.
Yeah, the snake oil of the 21st century.
Yeah. Did you tell her it's please, I don't do supplements. I Kegel size. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
Gotta keep that tight.
I've actually never seen Tupperware, I don't think. I've always just had stuff that I buy from stores. Nobody's ever tried to sell me Tupperware.
No, like I said, I've never had that. I've bought it in stores and kept it. Although I've never burped it. I don't know. I'm not used to again, that's something I associate as a stock gag as opposed to anything real. I never thought of it as a real thing. Like I said, all of this comes from TV, which I think is why it shows up in this episode. More just to mock that cliche.
It doesn't go in a lot of places. You get the joke early on, but that was Frank at his best. Was that a sketch that didn't go anywhere, frankly? So,
Frank knows how to riff with nothing. And the idea of just trapping him in one premise without a punchline is really great. And I do like how this is really just a setup for the grisly final moment with them where Dr. F has Frank's eyeball on a melon baller. That's so gross for this show. It almost crosses the line for what the line of this show would be, but it works. And I think it works just because of like that sketch as the setup. It's really fun. Especially where, Dr. F is initially pretty lenient, and then you get Frank trying to dig some melon off of him, and then he gets melon balled right in his face.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think the sketches in this one are all really, really great. It's fun. And you know what? Both of those inventions for the Invention Exchange, practical.
Yeah, I like the darkness that comes into most of these segments. Side note, like the one where I think it's the second segment where the bots ask Joel about the 60s, who he admits was about 9 at the time.
You can't go to Woodstock, Joel. That was probably my favorite part.
But he really, it's almost like beat poetry the way he spins out a tale of just how weird the 60s were as a time to live in, and the sense of the toxicity that was built into, especially when he talks about Frank Sinatra and just the levels of entitlement there. And it's just it just like, and then this whole riff was basically turned into Mad Men 15 years later.
People were allowed to smoke openly on the Tonight Show. Oh, good stuff. Okay, so the opening sketch, which I think is actually adorable, although I'm not quite sure why the bots have bedtime before the experiment. That doesn't make any sense to me. The robots and Joel say a little prayer for all the robots out there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of them. Not just the sexy robots, but the sexy robots get brought up.
Yeah, Crow's a big fan of Galaxina. Now, I get a little bit confused here because they bring up RoboCop, and RoboCop's not a robot, he's a cyborg. And Data and Lol are not robots, they're cyborgs. Those are different.
They're artificially created. I think they're casting a wide net here.
Wait, Data's not a cyborg?
He's an android.
All right. Well, he's got real skin, real yellow skin.
No, it's plasticky. It peels off in a few episodes.
Yeah, just like real skin does. But RoboCop is a cyborg. He is made of a man.
Yes.
And I don't know if any of these sexy robots that they mentioned, Cherry 2000, Galaxina, Twiki. Well, Twiki's a robot.
Yeah, Twiki is a robot from the Buck Rogers show.
Yeah, this seems to have been a real thing in the 80s, huh?
I mean, Cherry 3000 has wicked hair, I have to say. Or Cherry 2000.
Well, I mean, all I can say is, like, this just seems to be, like, a precursor to real dolls, so it squicks me out.
Hey, you know what? They're working on real dolls so that you can talk to them, and they could give consent.
I do think it's funny that Joel likes the most robotic looking of the group.
I would leave it to Joel to just want to pray for Twiki and insist the bots also pray for Twiki, who, if memory serves, was voiced by Mel Blanc through most of that series.
Really?
Yeah. Because Twiki's the bitty 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 robot, I think. Bitty bitty bitty, wanna dance buck. Do you have a favorite robot that you would pray for? I think you do, and I think I know what your answer is.
Try me.
Oh, it would be TikTok, obviously.
Yeah. Well, he's not really a robot. He's a mechanical wind-up doll, basically.
I don't know. He's a man made out of cogs and machinery. Aren't we going to count that as a robot?
Chris, what do you think? This is all we're getting bogged down in semantics.
That's what's great about it.
I don't know if you've listened to the delightful podcast Robot or Not.
I haven't. No.
In which, for the first 100 episodes, it is just basically John Siracusa being asked about various things and are they in fact a robot or not, and he puts down judgment on it. I believe he would say TikTok is a robot.
Yeah, but yes, I do like my TikTok. I like that they've turned a Victorian colonel into a movie star.
What's great about TikTok is that, like, you could really see a version of Terminator done with Wilford Brimley, so that when his skin comes off, it's just TikTok underneath.
And he cries at one point.
I know, he's the best.
Yeah.
Although, that said, the robot I would pray for is the police bot from a B movie called Rotor. There's this delightful, cowardly police robot in that film who is a big, blocky E.T. looking thing. Like, he's got an E.T. shaped head and like a big cylindrical body. He is a cowardly, nervous bot who just wants to read comics. He doesn't want to do anything, and he wears a police cap throughout the entire movie. But yeah, he's got like dinky robot arms and this kind of geez kind of voice. Like he sounds almost like Morty from Rick and Morty. It's great. Chris, before we say beach blanket bye-bye to this episode, do you have a final factoid for us?
I do. As you pointed out, one of the potential titles for this film before it was released was Never Steal Anything Wet. Do you know what that's a reference to?
The Wet Bandits from Home Alone, made well after this movie.
There was, in fact, a film from 1959, so a few years before this, called Never Steal Anything Small. It starred Jimmy Cagney and some other people who you haven't heard of. And it's about, apparently, I have not seen this, it's a color movie, and it was directed by Charles Lederer, and it's about racketeers infiltrating the labor movement, and this was Cagney's final musical film. Apparently one of the highlights, and I'm reading this from the Wikipedia page, one of the highlights is a duet between Cagney and Cara Williams singing a song called I'm Sorry, I Want a Ferrari.
I don't want a Chevrolet Corvette.
You want to get me Jeep and Jet?
I want a car that's highly priced.
What about a job that I can hike?
Okay.
Sounds like a first draft lyric for the Green Acres theme.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've seen Never Steal Anything Small, or if you'd like to ask Beth or Adam anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. It's Just a Show is a podcast from Megaphonic FM. Find all our fancy little shows at megaphonic.fm. And you can support It's Just a Show and access some superfan bonus bits from this episode and from many of our older episodes by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today on It's Just a Show, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/33.
All right, Chris, we've applied tanning oil to our midriffs in preparation for the next movie. What's that going to be?
Well, skin protection is very important, Beth, but as you know, summer is coming to an end. It'll soon be time for us to hang up our scuba gear, put our scrolls back into their frames, and leave our summer of sword and sorcery, sandals and sandy beaches behind, and go back to work. Labor Day is coming soon, and just in time for that, we'll have our annual celebration of the original Dodeca Laborer in Season 4, Episode 8, Hercules Unchained.
Oh. Okay. Well, I seem to recall, was this the last one that they did?
No, this is one of the early ones. The last one they did was Hercules before season 11.
Well, I don't remember anything about this one then. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I don't remember this one either, so it'll be a pleasant surprise. I know I've seen it, but it's been ages.
This is the one that I can remember. It's the one I enjoy the most.
Oh, well, happy birthday to you, Chris.
Well, until then, enjoy the last few bits of summer.
And remember, it's not stealing if you plan to give it back eventually.
Yes, and for our mermaids and mermen out there, our DMs are open.
All right, take it away, Theme Squad.
So never steal anything wet.